This is the hidden threshold, a place to slow down for a moment, to sit with belief, practice, and meaning when the old certainties don't quite hold, and chaos doesn't feel like an answer either. There's no instruction here, no doctrine to follow. Just an honest attempt to stay oriented in the space between devotion and discernment, light and shadow, knowing and not knowing. I'm Veyrin Vale. Let's begin. Sometimes it's as if the world around you starts to loosen its grip. Not with some sudden crash or obvious disaster, but in these subtle, almost invisible ways. The ground beneath your feet, which you always assumed was solid, starts to feel uncertain. Everything doesn't collapse at once. Instead, there's this gradual erosion of the things you thought you could always rely on. The routines, the people, the beliefs, the little anchors that used to keep you balanced and steady, they just don't seem to catch you the way they used to. In moments like this, most of us instinctively turn back to what's familiar. We reach for the old comforts, the beliefs we were raised with, the rituals we've carried out so many times before, the practices that once brought us peace, the prayers that once felt as natural as breathing. These routines aren't just habits, they're lifelines, woven into us by years of repetition and trust. They've patched us up in past storms, so it makes sense to look for shelter in them again. It's important to recognize that there's nothing weak about this. Seeking comfort in what we know is fundamentally human. It's an expression of our hope, our desire to find meaning and stability in the face of uncertainty. We're wired to look for patterns, for reassurance, for something that tells us we're going to be okay. The hard truth, however, is that sometimes even these familiar things don't offer the relief we expect. You do everything you're supposed to do. You light the candle, you say the prayer, you follow the motions. Maybe you meditate or journal or try to talk it out. But what once felt sacred or centering now feels empty, thin, maybe even pointless. It's like trying to hold on to water. Whatever you grasp just slips away. The words sound hollow, the actions feel mechanical, and the meaning you once found there is nowhere to be seen. That's when the struggle turns inward. You start to wonder if the problem is you. Maybe you're not trying hard enough. Maybe you're too distracted or too flawed or too lost. You question whether you've somehow broken the spell or if your doubts have driven away whatever comfort you used to find. It becomes a kind of loneliness that's hard to describe. It's a sense that you're disconnected, not just from other people, but from the very sources of comfort and support that used to sustain you. If belief is meant to be your foundation, why does it feel so distant and unreachable? If practice is supposed to heal, why does it leave you feeling more empty? When you've earnestly done everything you know how to do, why does it seem like nothing can stop you from slipping? This is more than just a rough patch. It's a crisis of trust. Not just in the world around you, but in the ideas, the rituals, the very things you thought would help you survive the hard times. The familiar tools don't work and you're left exposed, wondering how to rebuild your confidence in anything at all. And in that silence, that quiet that comes when your prayers seem to evaporate, when the rituals echo back to nothing, that's when you feel the weight of your longing. You weren't hoping for grand revelations or miraculous solutions. You just wanted a handhold, something small but solid to cling to while the wind picked up. The absence of even that can feel overwhelming, a kind of grief for the comfort that once was. It's a reminder of how fragile our sense of stability can be and how brave it is just to keep reaching out, even when it feels like you're grasping at nothing. When everything goes quiet, there's a reflex to assume something's wrong, a malfunction you can't see, or a hidden failure. The hush feels like judgment, as if you've been overlooked or cast aside, or as though the one thing you trusted finally slipped through your fingers. That kind of emptiness can echo especially loudly if you're already carrying pain or uncertainty. The silence amplifies your doubts, distorts your memories, and makes every shadow seem like confirmation that you're alone. But here's the truth. The quiet isn't a punishment. It's not a sign that you've failed some unseen test. It isn't a cosmic rebuke or a withdrawal of grace. Silence doesn't arrive to correct you or to signal that you're unworthy. Sometimes, the quiet is simply what's left when the world stops speaking for a while. Sometimes, it's just the natural pause between chapters, the space after an exhale. Eventually, you reach a place where the tools you've always relied on, the beliefs, the habits, the rituals, the comforting routines, they don't prop you up the way they once did. It's not because those things were fraudulent or hollow, or because you somehow broke them despite how strongly you feel that way. Their purpose wasn't to shield you from every ache or uncertainty. They were scaffolding, not armor. They could steady you, but not make you invincible. The comfort and meaning you found in them was real, but it was never meant to be a permanent escape from the unpredictability of living. It's natural to wish that your beliefs or daily practices could anchor you when everything else is in flux, that they could hold your world together when it feels like it's unraveling. We all crave something external to reassure us, to signal that we're okay, that we're seen and supported. But sometimes, no amount of outer reassurance can reach the part of you that feels hollow or lost. In these stretches, the quiet is just the landscape you find yourself in, not a betrayal. Silence, then, is not the enemy. In fact, it can be the most honest companion you have. It strips away illusions, like the idea that comfort will always arrive on time, or that meaning is something you can summon at will. It reveals how much you've grown dependent on the feedback, the little affirmations, the signs, and the affirming nods from the universe that let you know you're on the right track. When those signals vanish, you're not adrift or forgotten. It just means the relationship between you and your supports has either changed, matured, or paused for a reason you might not yet see. That's what makes this silence so unsettling. There are no answers offered. It doesn't hurry in to patch the holes or quiet your fears. It won't settle your questions or soothe your nerves. It simply sits with you, unadorned and unyielding. In doing so, it removes the props you didn't realize you'd built your life around. You see, the point isn't abandonment. It's not to leave you helpless or exposed. Instead, it's an invitation to notice what remains when the old comforts fall away. What do you find when belief is quiet? When familiar routines no longer ease your mind, what's left? When meaning arrives stripped of easy explanation, how can you move forward? What do you reach for inside yourself when the world is no longer answering back? Although it can feel like it, silence isn't a void. It's not emptiness. It is a kind of presence that refuses to mold itself to your expectations or ease your discomfort on command. It is unchanging, unapologetic, and vast. Simply put, it just is. Learning to abide in that quiet, to let it be itself without demanding it become something else, is where transformation happens. It's an invitation to discover the steadiness within, to trust that there is something enduring at your core that doesn't depend on ritual, feedback, or constant affirmation. This, then, is the real work. Staying present in the silence, listening for what arises in the hush, and recognizing that even when the world goes quiet, you are never truly alone. There's a depth within you that can meet the silence. It can withstand the absence of noise, and it can find meaning even when meaning seems elusive. This stretch of quiet is a necessary interval, a proving ground for your inner resources. It teaches you to trust that what's most real in you endures, even when all the familiar signals fade. Embracing the quiet, letting it teach you what it will is itself a kind of arrival. It's a step deeper into your own life and your own capacity to hold steady, come what may. When life grows too quiet for too long, the mind becomes restless, spinning in its own narratives in the absence of answers. Instinctively, we seek patterns, explanations, or even warnings, and our stories tend to turn dark and unforgiving. The silence becomes a blank canvas for our anxieties to paint worst-case scenarios, filling the void with imagined failures or hidden threats. It's a natural reflex, an attempt to impose order on uncertainty, but it rarely leads us somewhere gentle. We tend to imagine that belief, whether it's in something greater or simply in ourselves, should be a stabilizing force. It's comforting to think that if we cling to the right convictions or practice our faith with enough sincerity, we can shield ourselves from chaos. Maybe we don't expect perfection, but we at least hope for some sense of control. A promise that if we do our part, life will hold together. So when upheaval comes anyway, or when loss or confusion barges in despite our best efforts, it's easy to feel betrayed. We wonder if belief itself has failed us, or even worse, if we have failed it, coming up short in some invisible test. Rituals can also become entangled in this desperate hope for security. The simple act of lighting a candle or reciting a prayer or observing a cherished tradition may have once felt grounding or intimate, but now it carries a sense of urgency. We start performing these rituals with a hint of anxiety, as if doing them perfectly might just tip the scales and restore order. But when the world doesn't right itself, when comfort doesn't immediately return, disappointment seeps in. The sting feels personal, as if the ritual passed us by, or as if we revealed ourselves as unworthy by missing some secret step. In these moments, it's easy to get confused. We start to believe that the absence of comfort means the absence of meaning. The quiet becomes suspicious, a sign that something essential is broken. We equate being soothed with something being true, as if truth's main job is to reassure us. If our beliefs and practices don't calm our fears, we wonder what purpose they serve at all. But meaning was never meant to anesthetize us. Belief isn't a contract for perpetual calm. Rituals aren't spells to keep away grief or doubt or upheaval. They can't freeze the world in a state of order, nor can they guarantee us a life untouched by pain or uncertainty. Their true purpose is much more subtle, more enduring. They tether us to the world and to ourselves, even as everything seems to come undone. Through them, we participate in a story bigger than our immediate feelings, a story that persists beyond the reach of reassurance. The trouble arises when we start demanding too much from our beliefs and practices, when we expect them to be repair kits for every fracture in our lives rather than signposts or companions for the journey. When we treat silence as a malfunction rather than a natural part of being alive, as a breakdown in the music instead of a pause between the notes. That's when the quiet feels threatening. Not because it's inherently dangerous, but because it won't bend to our expectations. Silence won't rush in with comfort simply because we've shown up and gone through the motions. It doesn't trade our effort for instant relief, nor does it hand out rewards for perfect performance. When silence lingers, it's tempting to assume something is wrong, that we've missed the mark, or that meaning has slipped away. But absence of comfort does not mean the absence of meaning. Sometimes, silence is simply a space that invites us to notice what has always been there, just beyond the clamor of our demands. It's not proof of failure. It's an invitation to engage more deeply, to step into the world as it is, messy, unpredictable, and alive with meaning that doesn't depend on us feeling good. Perhaps, in these quiet moments, meaning stops trying to get our attention. It stops trying to wave or shout above the noise. It waits, instead, with patience for us to cross the threshold and live it. to risk presence even when comfort feels out of reach. And in that willingness to inhabit the silence, to walk with uncertainty, we may find that meaning is not something that's handed to us, but something we help create, minute by minute, breath by breath, through the simple act of staying present, even when the world refuses to reassure us. When nothing answers, the urge to walk away can be overwhelming. The silence presses in, and your first instinct is to pull back, to shut down, to let the echo of your own voice convince you that if no one's responding, there's little point in continuing to try. It's tempting to imagine that the absence of feedback is a sign. Maybe it's time to give up, or to withdraw effort, or to stop speaking or screaming into the void. But the truth is, the silence isn't testing you. It's not a riddle you're meant to solve or a puzzle waiting for the right combination of words or emotions to unlock a response. There's no secret password or hidden switch that will suddenly transform the emptiness into revelation. The quiet isn't holding out on you, waiting for you to finally measure up or say something profound. In that vast emptiness, what remains is surprisingly simple and unadorned. There's just you, left with the choice to keep showing up. The choice to return again and again, whether or not it seems to matter. You come back to the practice, not because you expect anything in return, but because the act of being there is its own quiet affirmation. You surrender the hope for breakthrough moments or grand epiphanies. You let go of the expectation that your persistence will be rewarded with clarity or comfort. And in this stripped-down space, practice shifts its meaning. It's no longer a strategy for fixing things, no longer a desperate attempt to escape discomfort or to manufacture a sense of progress. Instead, it becomes a kind of gentle companionship. It becomes a way to be present with yourself, even in the most uncertain times. The routine, whether it's lighting a candle or sitting in stillness or whispering a few words or simply breathing, is no longer just a means to an end. It becomes the end itself, a way to anchor yourself in the here and now. There's no applause for your effort, no visible badge of achievement, no external validation that you're doing it right. You're left with the raw reality of discomfort, the ache of not knowing, the awkwardness of staying when everything inside you wants to run. Yet this discomfort is honest and uncompromising. It resists your attempts to soften its edges. But in that honesty, there's also a kind of integrity, a lived truth that can't be faked or forced. Choosing to stay, to remain present in the absence of reward or reassurance, teaches you something essential. You begin to realize that your worth isn't contingent on feeling okay, that you don't have to earn your right to be here through achievement or emotional resolution. The silence doesn't strip away meaning. It asks you to encounter meaning in a new way that isn't dependent on noise or certainty. This isn't a puzzle to be solved or a test to be passed. It's a season to withstand, a tension to inhabit. In this stretch, belief is no longer a matter of conviction or certainty. It becomes an act of endurance, a quiet decision to remain. Practice loses its utilitarian edge and transforms into a statement. I am still here, even with my doubts, even in the quiet. Devotion is no longer measured by volume or grandeur. Instead, it's measured by the quiet, stubborn willingness to keep facing the direction you chose, even when your path is shrouded in fog. You learn that what matters most is your choice to stay, to continue turning up, to face the blankness without demanding answers, to let the silence simply be without trying to coerce it into speaking. This choice, repeated day after day, becomes its own kind of faithfulness and a subtle defiance against the urge to give up. Does this make the silence any easier to bear? No, not really. The ache doesn't magically dissolve and the emptiness doesn't fill itself in. What changes, though, is your relationship to it. The silence becomes something you can inhabit, not just endure. It becomes a space where you can breathe, however haltingly, and discover that you are not undone by it. You discover a new kind of resilience by living moment by moment, breath by breath, inside this quiet. You find that you can persist without guarantees, that you can remain present even when comfort is withheld. In choosing to stay, you aren't just surviving the silence. You're learning to let it shape you and to let it teach you about persistence, presence, and the quiet strength that comes from simply not leaving. In the end, it's this willingness to live inside the silence, to keep returning to your practice without the promise of reward, that allows you to move through this difficult stretch by enduring, by growing, and by discovering the quiet, enduring company of your own presence. If you're feeling a sense of emptiness at the moment, remember that it doesn't mean you've made a mistake or taken a wrong turn in your life. This sense of vacancy isn't a sign that your efforts have been wasted or that your internal compass has failed you. Your faith, whatever form it takes, hasn't disappeared. Your daily rituals, the small meaningful things you do, they still hold value, even if you can't sense their impact right now. Sometimes, life simply brings us to these quiet spaces, to places where the usual noise and activity fade into the background. It may feel unsettling, feeling like you're adrift or waiting for something to fill the silence, but this stillness is just a natural pause, a gentle lull in the rhythm of your days, not an error or a failing. There's no need to chase after certainty or to urgently seek a spark of belief to rescue you from this quiet. You don't need to have all the answers or even any answers to move through this period. The silence isn't a puzzle to be solved, and there isn't a hidden solution waiting to leap out if you search hard enough. Sometimes, silence is simply silence. Sometimes it's an invitation to be with yourself just as you are, without needing to perform or explain. You have permission to simply be here in this moment. You can let yourself inhabit the present, even if it offers no comfort or reassurance. It's okay to continue showing up for yourself in the world, even when it feels like your voice echoes into emptiness. You don't need to rush to fill the quiet with explanations or distractions. Let the stillness exist. Let it envelop you if it must. There's nothing that urgently requires fixing right now. No looming problems demanding immediate answers. No monumental decisions that must be made this very instant. The world will keep turning and life will continue unfolding, even if you choose to rest in this pause. Take a moment to notice where you are. Acknowledge the simple fact that you're still here, still breathing, still present, and still capable of witnessing your own experience, however subtle or subdued it may be. That, in and of itself, is something meaningful. That is enough. Allow the silence to remain, unforced and unhurried. Give yourself permission to rest within it, to let it wash over you without expectation or resistance. If this quiet space is what you need right now, honor it. Stay as long as you need, knowing that you are not lost or broken, but merely resting in a gentle, necessary pause. When you're ready, you will move forward again, but for now, let yourself be. If something here stayed with you, let it stay unfinished. You don't need to resolve it tonight. There's also writing from the same place, brief letters on Substack and longer reflections on Medium. I'm Veyrin Vale, and this has been The Hidden Threshold, a project of Obscura Meridian.